Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. We are in the house of an old friend of mine. Her name is Narinder Bharti, and it's taken me a long time to convince her to give me an interview. So let's see how this one goes. Welcome to the program. How are you doing?
Thank you, and I'm doing very well.
What a lovely house you've got.
Well, thank you.
So when you come down your road, do they plow it properly so that you can get out in the snow?
The city of Coquitlam is absolutely fantastic.
Wow.
They did a brilliant job this year.
No kidding.
They did.
That's good. So all of you were able to go to work?
We were all able to go to work, go to school, come back, and even entertain.
That's good. I mean, we've had 2 months of massive snows. I don't know how much snow you guys got, but in Burnaby we were up to our knees.
Well, let me tell you something. I take full responsibility for that because I made a wish. And my wishes always come true.
Really?
Yes, I do. Which is why I try not to wish too much. But this year I wished for snow.
You didn't?
I made that mistake. I'm so sorry.
Oh my. Well, we know who to blame, right?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Narinder, you were born in India, but you lived your impressionable years in Scotland.
Yes, I did.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
I was 2.5 when I was in India. Don't know anything about it. I've never been to India.
No, after that?
After that, never been.
Really?
Yes.
Even, I mean, now, never?
Never.
Okay, so your parents decided one fine day that they're going to go to Scotland.
That's right.
Why Scotland?
Why Scotland? Because my father's uncle was already living.
Ah.
Right, so he was already in Glasgow. And we landed in Glasgow. I have no idea of what life was like at the time, but I do remember going to ESL classes.
Okay.
And special classes where all the immigrants went to, and you didn't know much English. So I do know that when I landed there, I had no English whatsoever, just like everybody else like me.
And so when you were studying there, now we talk about people being uprooted from one place and putting themselves in other countries and trying to make a life for themselves and their children. It must be really hard.
It's difficult. It's difficult. I found that when we were in Scotland, even in Glasgow, we were in 2 or 3 different homes, and each time it wasn't anywhere near the community that you were already brought up into. So each time you went into a different high school, you had to start all over again, making friends, and it is tough. But I found that the Indian community at the time was very tight.
Yes.
So it didn't matter which background you came from,
right.
But there was only one Gurdwara there,
right.
and everybody went there. And it really was for the community. And my father was heavily involved with the administration of the Gurdwara and everything else. So we were there Saturdays and Sundays.
You had to then help in the kitchen, I bet.
I did. I made all the roti and I buttered them all, and I got to finally flatten them out.
Now, that sort of an upbringing with the community is very important for any community.
It is.
And it brings the bonding, and so the friends that you made in England or in Scotland, are they your friends still?
Believe it or not, if I do go back, they will remember me, but I was too much of a child then.
Right.
So when I left Scotland, I was 16.
Ah.
And my family was such that we had actually moved in the last 3 or 4 years before I left. We had moved to the outskirts. And my father had actually left Scotland and he had gone down to England. Right. So we were very much isolated. From the rest of the Indian community, and to make that trip, especially with my mother, she had 5 children,
right? And
between the 5 of us, it was impossible to go back in. So if you had a relative that came out and visited you,
right, that was fine.
Nice. It was
so
nice.
What packing order are you in?
Oh, I'm the eldest.
You are?
I'm actually the eldest of my entire generation.
No kidding.
And my mother was the eldest in her entire generation.
Right.
And my grandmother, my nanny, she was the eldest in her. So I come from a line of elder daughters.
Now, England, the life in Scotland and the life in England, was it similar because it's Great Britain?
Very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar. The only difference is that It's just the weather.
Hmm.
The weather in Scotland was a lot more damper. So when it
Oh.
rained, it got into your skin. And you felt it, you can feel it through your bones.
Right.
Whereas when in England, it was a lot sunnier, warmer. It's one of the reasons why we actually moved down there. My mother was not well.
Right.
And she was
Yeah,
starting
coming
to...
from a very hot country like India and going to a damp country like Scotland would have been really difficult for her.
Yes, it was.
But you know what? Women of her caliber and her era did all that.
They did all that.
Yeah.
And not only did they do all that, but my mother, she actually sewed at home. And I remember begging her, saying, "You're such a fantastic tailor. I want you to go into business for yourself. I would like you to do this." You could actually show her a picture.
Yes.
Or on TV, you would say, "Oh, Mum, look at this."
Yeah.
And she could make it.
Exactly
with
like
no
that.
pattern, no nothing. She was brilliant.
Wow.
But yet she didn't have the confidence in her own business
capability.
making skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she didn't do. But however, the community, even in Scotland and in England, there would always be somebody who would come round to your house, drop off great big huge sacks of cut material,
Yeah.
so they would sew, and they sewed.
Yeah.
And
she would help them out.
Well, that was her job.
So
That was her job. So she would make outfits for Marks and Spencer's, where they would sell in Marks and Spencer's for about $70 for a skirt, and she would get paid 10 cents a skirt.
Holy mackerel.
Yes,
And that was all done by her.
all done by her, and every other woman like her, who was a machinist.
Isn't that interesting?
But in Scotland, I remember when my holidays were around,
Right.
the vacation time came round, 2 months off school.
Yeah.
And my brothers and sisters, so there was a 3-year difference between myself and my siblings.
Right.
So they would be out there playing. My mother had me beside her with a
Helping her
smaller
out.
machine.
Yes.
And I would do all the straight lines. I would do all the straight lines. So now, when it comes to sewing,
Yes.
out of all of our siblings, I can actually make a salwar kameez. They can't.
Narinder Bharti is our woman in focus today. We're going to take a short commercial break and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about your life out of England and in Canada. And I want to ask you a very important question. Where do you feel at home? But don't answer that just as yet.
Okay.
Narinder is our woman in focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Narinder is our woman in focus today. So Narinder, England, you left England, you got married in England?
No, I got married in England, but my husband actually lived in Canada, in Toronto.
Okay.
And so I moved over in Toronto.
So how long did you live in Toronto for?
5 years.
Was it, now you've lived in British Columbia for longer.
Longer, much, much longer.
How many years here?
I've been here 22 years. almost
Wow,
23.
wow. So the life in Toronto, and if you don't mind my asking, which area in Toronto, because there are specific areas, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So I initially started off in Scarborough.
Okay.
I stayed in Scarborough for a couple of years.
Yes.
And then I moved over to the other side of Toronto, which was Mississauga.
Ah.
So I lived there, but throughout my whole entire time, I actually worked in downtown Toronto as well.
So as a child growing up, what did you really want to do? I mean, I always ask a woman, because you are at the moment, you're with Toastmasters, you're with women's organizations, you're helping people out. What was it that you wanted to do as a child?
Believe it or not, I didn't have a goal and I never had a plan.
Really?
And the reason why is because initially I first thought of politics, so I did political science, I did sociology, but my parents were such that because I was the eldest child, you were expected to get married. And when you got married, I remember I had passed my exams, I had even been to the universities and checked out the universities and everything else. I came back, it was the beginning of summer, so I applied for jobs. I got my first full-time job, which was a communication and marketing company.
Okay.
They set up educational courses.
Right.
And I worked there. And we were talking and everything else, and I was getting ready to leave and applying to go to Leicester University.
Right.
And my mama came round and they were talking and everything else, and said, well, what does she need to go to university for? She's got a job. And right there and then, everything, that was it. That was it. And well, you're going to go to university to get a job. You've got a job, so forget the university. And in those years, university was free.
Yeah. You didn't have to pay?
You didn't have to pay or anything like that. And so what I did is I started working. I worked full time, and when I moved from this educational company, I went to a publishing company called Collins Publishers. And from there I went to a software company that worked for the government with secure projects. And each time I changed jobs, I changed it based on more responsibility and more pay. And in England, which I think is really quite neat, is in England they actually advertise how much the position is for.
Yes. It's not ambiguous.
It really isn't. And so you know the position that you're going for, and if it was exactly the same amount that you're earning, you knew perfectly well it was the same responsibility, so therefore you aimed for something higher.
Right.
And that's what I did until, and they said, you can do anything you want once you get married. Oh, exactly. So you can do anything you want once you got married. You're the eldest.
Yes.
It's, you know, out of all your cousins and everyone, there is this entire pressure.
Yes, because until you're not married, they're not going to get married. They
can't get married.
Yeah.
And until you do the right thing, then you've got to be
the example.
The example. You have to be the example. And I was called Miss Goody Two Shoes.
So Miss Goody Two Shoes.
Well, by my siblings. It was not very pleasant, but that's fine.
So you've come to let's bring you to Canada. The life. I mean, I have lived in England as well. I've lived in Africa. I've seen India, and after living here for 10 years, I felt I was at home, you know. So for the past 40 years, I've been at home. How is it for you?
You know what? I'm home.
Yeah?
I'm home. I actually went back to England last year for 5 weeks. My mother is not very well, and so I thought this is a perfect time to make some major decisions.
Right.
And is this where I want to start thinking about? Because I always refer to London as home.
Yes.
I can't wait to go back home. I can't wait. But home is where your mother always is.
Yes,
right?
That's true.
But now I've got 2 children. They're 23 and 20 this year.
Yes.
Now where's their home going to be? And they would have been just as happy going to any major city in the world. But you have to think about them. And home for me is Vancouver now. It is. I'm happy. I'm independent. I can do what I want. I do not have aunts, uncles, parents, whoever telling me what I can and cannot do.
Yes.
And it's not that I'm doing anything right or wrong. I'm just living and doing the best that I can, which I think every woman tries to do.
You've always been very passionate about women's causes. You've always worked with women's groups. And through your Toastmaster, you've met some very powerful women speakers. I want to talk a little bit about that, but take me to that journey. How did you get to that? And then the detail we'll talk in the next break.
Okay. So I started my volunteer work off in Toronto. So I worked for a reception centre for refugees, and I was on their board. And gradually one of the board members introduced me to victim services. I'd never even heard of victim services. So I worked with the Toronto Police Department. I was there with them for 2 years. And that's when I realised that life is not absolutely wonderful for everybody.
Right.
And if you can help in any way whatsoever, why not?
Yeah.
And I was introduced to it very slowly. I enjoyed my time there, but I went home always feeling extremely grateful for the life that I had.
Right.
Now, when I came over to Vancouver, I came over and I started working for this engineering company that I was number 18.
Yeah.
And everybody else was a guy.
You were the only woman.
I was the only woman other than the receptionist who was pretty young. I was in my early 30s and she was 18.
Yes.
Just the two of us, and I was pregnant. And I had absolutely nobody, no family.
Yeah.
No in-laws, no one whatsoever.
Right.
And There was one day I was reading the paper, it happened to be the link, and in there was this picture of this organization called India Mahila Association who had just won a Human Rights Award.
That's right.
And I was reading up about it, and I picked up the phone and I said, hello, my name is Narinder.
Can I join you guys?
Can I join you? Can I come and check you out and see what you are about?
Yes.
Because what I did find is that living in Vancouver, I knew a lot of people, but I didn't know any Indians whatsoever. And I needed that connection.
Yes.
I needed that connection. I still needed to be rooted in myself.
Right.
And I've got a background. I'm Indian. And so I needed to feel some sort of connection, so I joined India Mahila Association. I have been volunteering with them for the last 22 years.
Wow.
And I can say that with conviction because my daughter was born at the same time that I joined the organization. And so they're what I would call IMA babies.
Right. You had to take them with you.
I did. I took them to every meeting.
Yeah.
And they were there during the International Women's Day festivals.
Yes.
They were there during the workshops. They were there through thick and thin.
Good.
And so they've grown up.
I want to talk to you about your other passion, which is Toastmasters. So let's take a short break and come back.
Yes.
Narinder is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Narinder Bharti is our Woman in Focus today. I love the last name. So that your... Where does that come from?
That's my dad for you.
All right. So you went back to your maiden name.
Yes, I did.
Now, and this is a question for some other time, that why do women have to change their last name? Because your identity is with your name, right? So I don't understand why we have to change our names to give the name of the person that you get married to. Of course, I mean, there is a union there and so on and so forth. But a person's identity is a person's identity. But then the question comes in, what are the kids are going to be called? Da, 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 da. So let's not go there. Let's come to your passion. When did you join the Toastmasters? And tell me something about them.
Okay, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Toastmasters really is my passion.
Okay.
I love it. You've got no idea of how much positivity I've had in my life ever since I've joined Toastmasters.
Okay.
I joined them in 2008.
Okay.
And the reason why I joined them is I needed to do something for me. I spent my whole life doing things for other people. This was actually a birthday gift to myself. And once a week I was going to a meeting and I was going to make it all about myself.
Okay.
Now Toastmasters saying is where leaders are made, and truly it really is where leaders are made. A lot of people think about it and they think of this as it's just a public speaking place. So you go out there and you speak in front of people. It's not just that. It is an atmosphere where everyone feels safe. It is supportive, and people are there to learn. You're not taught anything, but you're learning things.
Right.
Toastmasters is, you initially start off with two manuals.
Right.
One is called a communication manual, the other one is a leadership manual. You can do one or the other, or you can do both in sync.
Right.
You really can. So communications, there's 4 levels.
Right.
And your first level is you get a manual for each level, and you do 10 speeches. And so your first speech is called an icebreaker.
Yeah.
For about 3 to 4 minutes, you get up and speak for 3 to 4 minutes about anything.
Anything you like.
But anything that you speak about, you're evaluated on.
Right.
And a Toastmaster will evaluate you on that. And they will tell you what your great speaking skills were and so forth. Now, the leadership manual is broken up into 10 assignments. And in each assignment, there's 2 or 3 different levels.
Right.
So, for instance, you get to stand up and you evaluate the person that was right beside you. You get a grammarian role, and you're standing up there and saying, I was listening to you speak, but you had a tendency to say, Unbelievable how many people say that.
Yes, our Prime Minister does that too.
Yeah. So, and they keep on speaking instead of pausing.
Right.
So they work hand in hand.
Yes.
You learn to speak properly.
Yeah.
You learn to improve your grammar. You learn how to keep in a timely manner.
Right.
And you take on projects, small projects. You mentor.
Yeah.
So one of the projects in the leadership manual is mentoring. You have to mentor a new person. And so you're teaching them exactly what you learned from Toastmasters, so forth. So there's somebody always holding your hand. But it's more than just that. On the leadership skill, you learn how to conduct a meeting.
Right.
And what the steps are involved in sending out emails and communicating.
So has that helped you in your work with IMA?
So much self-confidence.
Yeah.
The self-esteem that you get because you think you can, you actually sit up taller.
Yeah,
you
that
do.
you can do it.
Yes, and then you have the courage to go up to a complete stranger and say, "Hi, my name is Narinder. Welcome." How often can you go up to a total stranger and do that?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it?
It is. It's very tough, but you find that it's baby steps. But these baby steps build on each other.
Right.
And you're there supporting each other, and you're learning to reach out and pick up the phone or sending an email and communicating. And communicating is really one of our worst problems. We don't know how to communicate anymore.
And with the advent of iPhones and smartphones, we've stopped doing that too. Exactly. We just text each other, right?
That's right.
Right.
And the other thing is respect for each other's time. It starts on time, it ends on time.
Good.
And if you...
Something Indians need to learn.
They do, but I've learned a lot from it. I find that I have a lot more courage and I can stand up in front of 500 people and speak to them. Doesn't mean that I'm not scared. I still have the butterflies, but you learn how to deal with them.
Isn't that just beautiful? Where are you heading in life?
In life, I would like to, with my Toastmasters journey, it started back in 2008.
Yes.
I'm trying to earn my DTM, which is Distinguished Toastmaster.
Right.
So I would like to do that.
Narinder is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.